just because I have the privilege and the honor to, as Phil, you taught me, to introduce the term my coda. And it's really easy for me to get all weepy about you, Phil, because you changed my life and so many people that I love's lives. And we met in 2008 with His Holiness, the Dalai Lama, and our work together in Europe, being a chairman of the Compassion Games, and our partnership in building the Sign Alliance and everything that Four Worlds has done. And your whole life is a beautiful example of what is possible when you commit truly to living as one human family. You're an enrolled member of the Ihanktonwan, Dakota, and Chickasaw nations, as well as an internationally recognized leader in human, community, and economic development, and have changed so many of our lives. It's would take up the whole time that we have to just talk about how important knowing you and having your wisdom for us at this time is. This is a challenging time. And through our alliance, when Jim Garrison said, hey, we need a summit on Ukraine, it was clear to us that we also needed to hear many views and have the benefit of the wisdom of different perspectives, because this is a challenging situation. This really could turn out like a nuclear annihilation. So I can't think of anything more urgent. And when I talked to you, you said, yes, John, it's nuclear war or peace on earth. And I want to offer an Indigenous perspective on that. So that's what we're here to do. I'm going to disappear in a minute. I'm going to be supporting you from behind the scenes. And I want you to use this time to share with us the Indigenous view on these incredible challenges that we're facing, and where do we go from here? Chaos or community, as Dr. King said, right? So I'm going to remove myself, and maybe a prayer would be an appropriate way to start. I'm going to remove myself and invite you to share with us. Thank you.
Brother, I want to say this. If you see any good qualities in me, if you didn't have them in you, you couldn't see them in me. If you hadn't done the same things I've done, you wouldn't be able to see them in me. So we're just simply mirrors to one another. We all are, each of us, a sovereignty, ancient, imperishable, and everlasting. That's how we're conceived in that manner. Hoten Kashla Wakantaga, creator of the universe, most beloved one, all powerful one, most kind one, most compassionate one, ever forgiving one. O ancient of days, O blessed beauty, we call upon your holy power at this time to infuse our entire being with thanksgiving and wisdom and insight as we look deeply into our human condition, into how we can transform the time we're in to a time of peace, rather than having to go through nuclear war before we awaken to the spiritual reality. We are one human family, and the hurt of one is the hurt of all. And the healing and upliftment of one is the healing and upliftment of all. And we give thanksgiving and call together all the tribes of the nation of the east, from where comes the red sunrise. At the south, where comes new life, they may come together in unity and harmony. At the west, from where comes thunder, lightning, and rain, they may join us at this time. The north, from where comes the white snow, they purify our hearts and minds, so we're free and severed from all save your holy power. And most beloved one, all beloved creator, we just ask forgiveness that these masculine qualities of our human family have been so overbalanced, they've almost brought us to the brink of the annihilation of most of life on earth. And we humble ourselves before our sacred Mother Earth, the giver of all things, the giver of all life, and her representatives, womankind. And we pray that those, what many cultures call in different ways, the feminine dimensions of who we are as human beings, they arise and there be balance as two wings of the eagle. We have equal power and respect, one as man and one as woman. So we might truly see the fulfillment of all the prophecies. As it says in the Lord's Prayer, thy will be done on heaven, on earth as it is in heaven. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And all these other prophecies that promised that after this long spiritual wintertime, that our indigenous people would arise, and we would, with all members of our human family, and arise as we are now, to ensure that all our future generations, our 7 generations, might live again. We might enter that time they call the day that shall not be followed by night. O my God, unite the hearts of thy servants and reveal unto them thy great purpose. May they follow thy commandments and abide in thy law. Help them, O God, in their endeavor, and grant them strength to serve thee. O God, leave them not themselves, but guide their steps by the light of knowledge, and cheer their hearts by thy love. Verily, thou art their helper, the Lord. Halimi chante washtealo, shukmano hemeado, chinupasapa meado, halimi chante washte. And I closed in the way when we close or begin, shukmano hemeado, chinupasapa hemeado, which means my names are Shunkmano and Chinupasapa, and I stand fully responsible before the Creator for my words and my actions. So I'm going to give a little backdrop here before we get into this issue of nuclear war or peace on earth, and it is a perspective. I was born at Haskell Indian School. It's an Indian boarding school. My mom and dad were sent from their homes when, of course, as we know, the both Canadian U.S. governments had policy to try and kill the Indian and save the child. You know, in the words of Duncan Campbell Scott, who was the Commissioner of Indian Affairs here in Canada for almost 3 decades during the implementation of the boarding school system, he said, "Did I say Indian problem? There'll be no Indian problem. In 2 decades, there'll be no more Indians." So that's kind of the context that I kind of grew up with, looking at the world. And we didn't have television in those days, so I was a vociferous reader. I read everything I could, especially about our Indigenous relatives and what happened. And of course, I heard stories from my father and my Uncle Vine Deloria Jr. and my grandfather Vine Sr. and so many other elders, and from my mother's grandmother. She lived with us, and she told me the stories as well. So I knew that there was different sides to the stories I was hearing in school. And I remember back when I was just young, we were told the Russians were going to bomb us, and we had to get underneath our desk and hide and so forth. And we were preparing for nuclear war, and the only good communist was a dead communist, and so forth and so on. And so there was this tremendous propaganda, and I'm sure the same propaganda was going on in Russia as well, because I think we have to know, and it's very clear to see that capitalism and communism both are rooted in materialism. They're not spiritually founded. They're founded in materialism, both of them. And so when I was getting ready to graduate from high school, I was 17. My good friend Mike Friedman shared that he was going to hitchhike to Europe, and I really wanted to go to Europe and see the story from there, from that side, because I knew something had gone wrong there for things that had happened. You know, in the fact that there was around 100 million, and now scholars say 108 million Indigenous people living across the Americas, and when Columbus arrived, and by the middle of the 1800s, that was reduced down to 15 or 20 million, a loss of around 85 million human beings left this physical plane of time and space. And a lot of that, by the way, was by disease. There was certainly genocide that was played out, still played out in the boarding schools, but a lot was from disease, as we weren't able to deal with measles and smallpox. We just didn't have this experience with that. Anyway, well, sure enough, we left Walla Walla. Sure enough, we left Walla Walla. And I remember so clearly, it was just the end of August, and my father had made a little sign that said, "New York or bust." And so we went to the edge of Walla Walla, Washington, my friend Mike Friedman and I, I kind of think of this as a kind of a Native American Jewish coming of age story, so to speak. And he was one of the only Jewish students. I was one of the only Native students. And so we kind of made allies. And so sure enough, we started off in Walla Walla with our thumbs out. 44 rides later, 4.5 days later, almost 5 days later, we arrived at the Staten Island Ferry. And I remember they were playing drums and so forth. And I was from a little place called Walla Walla, Washington. And we didn't know any of those kind of things. Well, anyway, there's many stories about what happened there. Getting a chance to do the twist at the Peppermint Lounge, Joy D and the Starlighters, going down to the Cafe Y and Cafe Wine Out down at the Greenwich Village, where I met Richie Havens and so forth. And he had no teeth before he became kind of famous. And then we got a free rider ended up getting a free ride in a freighter on over to Germany. And we arrived in Bremerhaven, Germany. Young German met us there when we got off. Mike always made friends, so we stayed overnight with him and headed off to Bremerhaven. We just went to Hamburg, where I wanted to always go there to see, because I knew they'd been firebombed so badly they just burned everybody up. Anyway, from there we went on down we heard the Oktoberfest was going on. So of course we had to head to Oktoberfest. Of course, those were some of my wild days. Anyway, we got to Munich, and then all of a sudden came the Cuban Missile Crisis. And it was just frantic. I remember especially Mike's parents were very, very frightened because of the Holocaust that happened and his relatives being killed in the concentration camps. And I called my dad because there was no flights coming back to the United States. It was full of people leaving. It was really quite tense. And my dad said, "Well, son," he said, if this thing's going to start, they're going to come over so fast. He said, "It'll be over so quick." Because, of course, the Russians, compared to what the forces were in Europe at that time, could have just swept over Europe. And he said, besides, he said, "Son, I don't think they're going to fight. I don't think they're going to fight. There's something behind this thing." And so sure enough, as you know, the story, of course, what had happened, they discovered that there was missiles being built there in Cuba. The Russian fleet came. John F. Kennedy, President Kennedy, of course, went through this whole thing, and they were going to have this nuclear battle and so forth. And then they made an agreement, and the ships turned back. And of course, President Kennedy became a great hero and so forth for what he did there. Well, I really, truly wanted to go meet some Russians and hear the story, because what had happened was, when we got to Munich, since we didn't have that much money, we wanted to go to work, so we got a job at this Arbeiten camp, work camp, and it was a work camp, primarily our Italian relatives, and I guess as two young 18-year-old American teenagers, they gave us this little place, only just a one room. I think we had a little bathroom outside, had a little wood stove in there and so forth. But next to us was the head of this camp. He was Yugoslavian and a very, very passionate Marxist, but just a good man. And all of a sudden, we can say, just a minute here. I mean, he really, really was a good man. He really had a passion, a great passion for those in poverty. And he shared a lot of perspectives about what was happening in the extremes of wealth and poverty and so forth. And although I didn't convert to Marxism, but I certainly could feel him as a human being. It just didn't make sense what I'd heard, although I knew that the history, and I think it's very important to understand this history. Like my Uncle Vine said, he said, U.S. government made over 300 treaties with indigenous people in the United States. And he said, they broke every promise except one. That is, they promised to take our land, they did. And it's true. Every single treaty was broken. And so, I knew, and then as I studied history and saw this continuous war going on, and these broken promises and so forth, I knew something was not quite right. So sure enough, we made our journey from Munich and then went on down through Austria and down to Italy, and had quite a time there. Came up to the. In fact, if you got a picture there, I'll show you kind of where I was. That one picture, John, on my way here. This is on my right, on the right hand side of me here is Michael Friedman, and that's Cecil Guest. We'd met him in Rome, Italy. We were on our way to Barcelona, Spain, before heading up to Stuttgart. So that's a good idea of kind of the youth we were at that time. That's good, John. You can put that down. So then we ended up in Stuttgart, and we stayed in a bomb shelter, former German bomb shelter. We had these great big steel doors, and we had to walk down, and they had to see where people could sit around, and they had a fireplace there and so forth, and that was quite an experience. They had built a parking lot over the top of it, and we got a job at the Schwabing Garage washing cars, 75 cents an hour. Well, at that point, Mike. Of course, his parents weren't happy that he stayed in Europe when they wanted to come home. So he decided he needed to go back because he didn't have any further resources. I had a little bit left, and I wanted to continue my journey. I especially wanted to go to West Berlin, and I wanted to go see the Russians. So I got a train out of Stuttgart, and I remember coming to the border of East Germany. And of course, these young East Germans came in machine guns and so forth. I realized, oh, this is something. They were just my age, carrying these machine guns. So sure enough, we went into West Berlin. And of course, at that time, West Berlin was sitting in the middle of East Germany. But the treaties were made. If you were Canadian or US or French or English, you could go across into East Berlin via Checkpoint Charlie. So I said, okay. I did a little research and found out where the Russian embassy was, so forth, and I had somebody write out in German to the taxi driver that I'd get on their side to take me to the Russian embassy. But sure enough, I came across Checkpoint Charlie. Of course, the East Germans checked me out to see I was, they couldn't quite understand what I was doing. But I said, I'm going to go to the Russian embassy. And so I got to the Russian embassy, great big building, I'll never forget it, great big doors. And so I rang the bell. And I was just kind of waiting, and somebody spoke to me in Russian or German, I'm not sure which. And I kind of surprised me and said, is there somebody here I can speak with? Long silence. And all of a sudden he said, who is this? I mean, just like that. Boom! Who is this? And I said, this is Phil from Walla Walla. And, a few minutes later, this gentleman came down, dressed and spoke. You could not tell he was not an American or from the United States. I mean, perfect. I mean, there was just no way. And I figured he must have been KGB. But he was such a nice gentleman. He invited me to come upstairs into the embassy. We spent 3 hours together, 3 hours visiting together. And he shared with me, I said, what really was the story behind the Cuban Missile Crisis? He said, well, there was an agreement made at the time this was settled that we wouldn't talk about this, but he shared it with me. He said, what happened, and by the way, you go back and research now, you'll find this is what happened. The United States had built a whole series of ICBM missile bases or launch pads across Turkey, right on the border into Russia. And the Russians, in a way, would counter, just like if you put a bunch of missiles in Mexico faced into the United States, they decided that they would then, if that was the case, they would then, it really kind of was a way to get the US to take down their ICBM missiles. So they began building the missiles in Cuba, knowing exactly what the US would do and getting them, by the way, in the process of taking out all the ICBM missiles along Turkey. And that's what happened. But it was agreed too, they would not tell anybody about it so that President Kennedy would come out of it a hero. And so that was history. And so really interesting. After the 3-hour visit, he gave me 3 books. I remember one of them had a picture of Cuba with a black widow spider on it with a USA across it. So they are very highly political books. And of course, I'm going to say again, what I learned there, I didn't become a Marxist or whatever. I learned there's many sides to any issue. And you've got to listen to all sides justly, objectively, to really bring people together. So then I had to go down to visit the brothers down, the East Germans down. I went to remember this beer hall. I went down there as my wild days. And I remember we sat in the corner. It was about 10 German young men. I felt so much compassion for them. Their teeth were all rotten and so forth. They didn't have many dental care. And of course, they bought me lots of German beer, and we had just a big time. Of course, they love Indigenous people there in Germany, and because they have that in that tremendous connection yet to the land, to their background. And so then we left. I left in a taxi, and the taxi took me into East Germany. And had they caught me in East Germany, I would have been in trouble, because they would have locked me up. So anyway, I got the driver to bring me back to Checkpoint Charlie, and I was feeling pretty good. And I remember, I don't know why I did some of these crazy things when I was younger. They say that the Creator protects fools and children. Well, I was over 18, so I was in the fool category. But I remember they had this drop gate, and then you go to the Germans, East Germans would check you out. So, but I high jumped this. I literally high jumped this thing. I jumped over the thing. Of course, they brought me in and strip searched me. And thankfully, I had left those 3 books in the taxi, because I had carried those across there to the other side. And I knew, by the way, when I jumped over that drop gate, they could see me over there. So I didn't figure they'd kill me or shoot me. But they strip searched me, and of course, I went back across. So from then on, I began to really watch and try to understand what was going on. And then I had a chance to on a number of occasions, both twice in San Francisco, then in Kyoto, Japan, to get a chance. In fact, I had a dialogue with Mikhail Gorbachev and learned a lot about what happened in the late 1990s and late 1980s and early 1991, when the agreement was made about things changing. We would have that picture, John, of President Gorbachev. I'm just sharing this so that as you can see, what I'm having to say came from personal experience. Yeah, so here we are. It's my dad on my right side, my mom, and Mr. and Mrs. Gorbachev, LauraSa Gorbachev. I found him to be a very, very fine gentleman. We were there in Kyoto, Japan, starting a Green Cross, which was really about helping on environmental issues. And it was there really that I began to understand what had happened, a little bit of history about this present conflict. It's important to know that, between 1783 and 1991, Ukraine was primarily a part of Russia. And when the meetings happened, and maybe this next picture of President Gorbachev, and it's very important, and you can see, there we go. So there's a picture in 1991, 1991, where all these leaders from different Western countries are promising President Gorbachev they will not expand NATO even into East Germany at that time. That's also President Bush Sr. made those promises. The Chancellor of Germany made the promises. I mean, it's by the way, anything I'm saying here, you can go on and investigate your own independently yourself on the internet, on Google. It's all there. And so that was the promise. And so to give a little more history, In 1983, William Casey was the head of the CIA. He created what they call the Endowment for Democracy, NED. And their whole purpose was to carry out the clandestine operations of the CIA, in which, by the way, their goal was, of course, to first of all, break up the Soviet Union, and who they saw as an enemy, and to take them down. So then you have in 1991, this is a quote, Google look, Alan Weinstein was the head of NET at that time. He says, a lot of what we do covertly was done 25 years ago by the CIA. And so at that time, you had the Warsaw Pact, which was formed in May 1953. And maybe share that slide, if you would. That's overall, so we can take a look and see where it was when the agreements were made. There it is. Now, at this time, and this was before, and by the way, by 1990 it was the same. The Warsaw Pact, all there in kind of orange, they had made agreement and made promises they would not expand NATO beyond into these other countries. That was part of the whole basis of which this you might say agreement was made with President Gorbachev to, you might say, in the Cold War. So you can see these countries: Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Romania, Bulgaria, Moldova, Poland, Ukraine, Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, of course, Finland and Sweden were neutral. And then we see the continuation of what happens. So then let me show the next slide, if you would, John. This is the current situation from that promise that was made. They wouldn't expand. So yeah, that's the one. When you just put up. Okay, so you can see that all these countries that they promised they wouldn't move NATO into, they did. Poland, of course, Germany united. I can understand the Czech Republic, Hungary, Romania. All these nations became then part of NATO, which was a violation of what was promised at that time. Then you find in 2013, you begin to see large amounts of funding pouring into Ukraine. In fact, there was 20 projects funded, and at that time, the head of the Endowment for Democracy, Carl Gershman, said, the biggest prize that we're after is Ukraine. By the way, anything I'm saying here it's not something hidden. It's just, independently investigate, check it out for yourself. And 6 months later, after he said that, the president, Viktor Yanukovych, I hope I can say that right, was removed through the Orange Revolution. 65 projects had been funded prior to that. On December 2013, you can go see John McCain there before the overthrow there. And standing by his side was neo-Nazi, and this is all verified. It's not something I'm just making up. It's not some clandestine thing. This Olav Yakic, anyway. Now, at that point, before the Orange Revolution, only 40 to 45% of the Ukrainians wanted to join Europe. They wanted to stay, the majority wanted to stay in their relationship with Russia. And of course, in October 2014, I believe I'm right. The Orange Revolution occurred, and it was tremendously supported behind the scenes by the CIA. In fact, after that, they funded 334 projects, which, by the way, were removed from the website when this conflict began with Russia. Now, I want to say that doesn't. I'm not saying, by the way, that Russia is somehow a Puritan here, because we know that we know what's the history of Russia. We know the millions of people who were killed there. We know that there's a tremendous control, just like here, of people in different ways. They're both two systems based in materialism. That's their point. You know, one says, you know, the whole idea that many buyers and many sellers bring happiness, pure laissez-faire capitalism. On the other hand, there's the other materialistic viewpoint. Now, what I think is really important to now look at for a moment before I suggest how we can possibly, in a democratic fashion, and again, who am I? I'm just sitting here in my little place on Semiahmoo First Nations territory, saying these things. So, but I think it's important that every human being be concerned. Probably most people don't know that this was, by the way, prophesied back in 1955, that the weapons of mass destruction would develop incredibly, and that's exactly what's happened. So there's just been an announcement. It's been in the works since 2019 of the Poseidon Nuclear Torpedoes. There's 30 being built. These nuclear torpedoes can travel at 3,300 meters. That means they can travel at seabed. They travel. They can travel 10,000 kilometers. They are carried. 6 of them can be carried in a big nuclear submarine, which is, by the way, the big one is sitting on the Arctic right now. With these, again, they have a reach of 10,000 kilometers. The sub that they're under the Arctic right now can stay under the Arctic for 120 days without coming up. They have a range. Now, these are like underground drones. They have a range of 10,000 kilometers or 6,280 miles they can go. So right now, these are poised, and they create now these carry 2 megatons of 2 megaton warheads. 2 megaton warhead is 125 times greater than a Hiroshima bomb that was dropped. 120 times more powerful. And there's all kinds of videos you can see. Very few people have looked at them, but again, can you imagine this? They can 10,000 kilometers, over 6,000 miles. They can set. They can change and move around. They're completely. They're so deep, and they have a capacity to change their sounds. They can sound like different things. They can go into silent mode and so forth. And when they're launched, they create a wave 500 meters high. 500 meters high. The Statue of Liberty, just to give you some context, is 93 meters. These create a wave 500 meters. The Empire State Building is 443 meters. These create a 500 meter wave. And again, they can travel under the ocean at 3,300 meters under. So and they travel at a speed between 70 to 100 kilometers an hour. So they're faster than anything we know. There's 30. They already have some built, and they've already tested them, and they've got more coming in the thing. So that's one situation. That means that literally, and they also are built with cobalt, so that they would make unlivable, cities. I mean, whole swaths of cities. Plus, for instance, let's say if one was launched on Seattle, it would completely wipe out everything to the Rocky Mountains, and the radioactivity would go clear to Montana. That's the situation. Now, along with that, and this is even just as concerning, is they've now come out with as well what they call the Zircon Hypersonic Cruise Missiles. And they've actually now put those into the Atlantic. These missiles travel 9 times the speed of sound. They're literally, in fact, John, why don't we share that one short video so you can get to see them. They can, right now, there's no missile system we have to penetrate those. That's good. So they've now have their largest battleship in the Atlantic within striking distance of the east coast of the United States with these missiles loaded on. And they move so quickly that we have nothing to defend against them. We're going to have to find, including the submarines. So at the same time, we have to know too that the Chinese, if you go, you can also know that they're following suit. They're developing their own Poseidon torpedoes. They're sharing information in terms of the missiles and so forth and so on, and that all the protagonists on all sides of this conflict in Ukraine, their submarines off the coast of all dimensions of this conflict. As well, this doesn't include already the I think it's somewhere around 14,000 equally divided between the United States and Russia that are already poised to take off in the air side. So that's just a briefing of Mitaki Epi, my relatives, of what's going on here from my perspective. And I have to say that I'm sure it's, by the way, I'm not saying that somehow it's not the same in Russia, but certainly here, we're only hearing one side. There's nothing going on in terms of listening to what the other side is. And I'm sure on the other side, the propaganda is going the same, both sides. So here's what I would propose that needs to happen. And John, if you could put up that map of those 4 provinces.
What do you want me to put up?
The one of the Ukraine air. There we go. Okay. Now, when the Orange Revolution occurred, these 4 provinces, which Russia is claiming that's what their goal is, to take these 4 provinces. There's no question that the majority of those relatives living there speak Russian. And since the Orange Revolution, they broke away, and there's been constant shelling going on and so forth and so on, all kinds of, just like in any war, atrocities back and forth. Of course, when this happened, that's when Russia went into the Crimea. They said they had a vote. Of course, this is where I'm saying that if they had a vote, then there must be this idea that it must be a democracy. And then they had votes they claimed in these other 4. But of course, nobody was there to officiate them from any side. And of course, they're saying, well, that couldn't be. So what I'm suggesting is this. I'm suggesting if truly both sides truly want to end this and not go into nuclear war, because I can guarantee you, they moved in these Panzer tanks. And at that point, if you listen to the Russian side, they said, we're going to respond in kind. You can see it now. They've increased the shelling. They've increased the because they know these Panther tanks are coming. The Abrahams are coming. They know that. So they're intensifying this before they can arrive. Now they just announced today they're going to be sending missiles. So we're coming very, very close if we're not careful. So if you'd put that back on one more time, John, brother. So here's what I'm suggesting. I believe that there should be a ceasefire immediately, and that wherever we can find in the world, truly, this has to be, we have to really hold all sides to account. It has to be completely transparent. And again, I'm sure that Russia would agree to this, that if people are still wondering where the Crimea is, so have a vote, have a democratic vote, supervised by neutral parties, truly neutral parties, and have it with all the technology we have. It can be very open, and revote the Crimea to see if, in fact, if it was true that 90% of the people wanted to be part of Crimea. And then in each of these 4 provinces as well, have a vote there, including those people who've had to leave. And it's easy to find out who was there and who wasn't there, and find out if Kherson, for instance, votes they should stay with Ukraine. Well, he needs to be respected. If they decide that the majority wants to be with Russia, then people can choose to be where they want to stay in there in Kherson, or they want to go back into Ukraine. The same with all of these, all 4 of them. Let there be truly a democratic vote, transparent, so that the people themselves can decide which side they go. And then along with that, have full agreement, rather than we're talking about, it's cost the global economy at least $2 trillion, this battle. And it's escalating. And not only that, we're understanding on another side, the herd of one truly is a herd of all. I'm right here in Little White Rock, British Columbia. And neighbors down here with the interest rates in their house, they're having to foreclose their homes. They don't have the money to pay. The food prices are up, the energy prices are up, and yet Shell Oil Company made the greatest profit ever in history this last quarter. Can you imagine? And while we're sitting here talking, 6 members of our human family are dying from starvation every second. In a world with the wealth we have. So that's what my suggestion is. Stop now, and let there be a democratic decisions made in these provinces by the people themselves, and honor that, and rebuild. Take the money and rebuild. That's my suggestion. It's kind of draft at this point. John, we just talked about doing this just a few days ago. And so I've been doing my research, but it came clear. If both sides are saying they believe in referendums or votes, let's have a vote. Let them vote it. So,
well, brother, thank you for doing the homework, for bringing the clarity and the wisdom and the Indigenous perspective to this. I just want to put this in context, tell you what we're actually doing together here, all of us. So it was your phrase, brother, unprecedented unified action, that evolved out of the Compassion Games to create the SIGN Network, this alliance of social innovators that are committed to behavior change through collaborative learning and innovation and unprecedented unified action. And part of that is learning how together to create what I call these tales of synergy. And Jim Garrison came forward from Humanity Rising, Ubiquity University. He's one of the members of the Alliance, and said, I want to do a summit on the Ukraine. We need to have a peace movement at this moment. And everyone doesn't agree with Jim's views on everything. And that's really good, because what we realize, no, we need to hear different perspectives and views. So we said, and that summit is February 27 to March 3rd on Humanity Rising. And you were the first to say to me, well, I want to contribute. I want a different perspective to be heard, to make sure that what I'm bringing as a pathway to peace. And you know who's got a vision for a peace for all of us? Is Zelensky. He called for a global peace formula summit. And you know what? His global peace formula is different than the Ukrainian peace formula. He's actually seeing a vision of all of us in this moment, saying, wait a minute, we need to stop. The way we're operating is unacceptable. If we don't change our direction, we're going to wind up where we're headed. And if we're not paying attention, I mean, this is serious. Look what you shared with us, Phil. These weapons are getting more and more fierce. And you know, it was Dr. King who said in his acceptance of the Nobel Peace Prize, he says, modern man has brought this whole world to an awe-inspiring threshold of the future. He's reached new and astonishing peaks of scientific success. Yet in spite of these spectacular strides in science and technology, and still unlimited ones to come, something basic is missing. There's a sort of poverty of the spirit, which stands in glaring contrast to our scientific and technological abundance.
Yes.
And the indigenous perspective is a spiritual, a moral dimension, a conscience.
And you know, I want to say, brother, that to see the incredible destruction going on, and to see all the mothers and the grandmothers and the aunties and including them being killed. I mean, the destruction. At the same time, I'm sure the same feelings are for the mothers and aunts and uncles and loved ones of the Russian soldiers are being killed. And, you know, now they're shelling into Russia, which a lot of people don't realize. Right. So it's getting deeper and deeper and deeper. But in order to really, truly be peacemakers, we can't allow love, by the way, to take us away from the truth, or hatred. We have to really, truly look at this from all sides and listen to everybody. Right now, there's no dialogue whatsoever. I mean, just being able to even to say probably what I've said. Some people to say, "Well, he's completely on their side or that side." No, we've got to listen to both sides. If we harbor, no matter what it is, you know, we've got to really, really look with a spiritual eye, really deeply feel for all sides, but understand too that this conflict between the United States and Russia has been going on since history. I mean, after World War II, it's been intensive, and right now sadly, it's being fought out. And the Ukrainian people are suffering tremendously from both sides. It needs to stop, and the name calling needs to stop. You know, everybody values their lives just as much as values their own lives. We value our lives as much as anybody else, and their children.
Right.
So I want to be real clear about that. This is not somehow saying it's okay. War is not. From any part is no good. That's why it should be immediately stopped. And some relatives are saying we should take Crazy Horse's pipe and go to Moscow. We should go there as indigenous people and say, but again, will they really honestly respect the people's decision in those provinces to decide for their own self what they want to do? And will they commit themselves to rebuild Ukraine, to rebuild this, and to truly have peace? Because if it's not, there will be peace on earth. There's no question. That's prophesied. Now, whether it comes after a nuclear conflict or not, who knows? We may have to go that way.
Right.
Really, I'm sorry, but I think we may. Yeah. But we have this collective, and it's our choice right now. And we are at the moment of choice. We can choose to come together. We can choose collectively and individually to truly come together with one heart and one mind and one bodies, with the understanding that the clash of different opinions with love and compassion ignites the fire of truth. But we have to have a dialogue. As long as only one propaganda on one side and one propaganda on the other side, it's not going to happen. It's not going to work.
Yeah. Well, the pattern, you know, is that we take sides. We assign blame. He says, they're right, they're wrong. and to have empathy here, to hear the narrative you're saying and say, how does it look from the Russian point of view? I don't think Putin gets up in the morning and looks in the mirror and thinks he's the evil madman that we want to believe or we're being told to believe he is. He's got a story that justifies and explains this incredible disaster he's created. Need empathy for all perspectives and to find a way together. The game has been so broken, it's either taking pleasure in creating the pain or rooting for the people enduring the pain, and everybody's losing. This is an example where win-lose is lose-lose, and we all have everything at stake. This is as serious as it gets. Now, Phil, here's the good news. We're connected right now, all of us. Instead of governments doing this for us, governments need to do this with us.
Exactly.
We, the people, like you say, sovereign, non-state actors.
We
Look
are.
what happened, how people started to go on to Google reviews and let the people of Moscow know, hey, your government's lying to you. I mean, we are all on the battlefield with this one. And therefore, I'm so grateful to everybody saying, instead of, because it was King, look at the power that King had. He had no military, he didn't have no weapons, he didn't have hold an office, but the power of his thoughts and his words and his deeds changed the world. And that's who you are, Phil. And that's who we are.
And I think we have to also understand that those who have made decisions that it's necessary to eliminate Russia, so to speak. Of course, there's economic reasons for that, but at the same time, if their parents were raised during the time of Stalin, and the millions and millions of human beings who were killed and slaughtered, and had that, and they can have that view and that feeling about what happened there, you can understand both sides. It's not like it's one side, but I can say this, that we have to also acknowledge, and I can say as an Indigenous person, what happened here has never stopped. It's never stopped. The warring, I was there when my dad took me, when President Eisenhower dedicated the Nuclear Dam, a little tiny boy. It was a huge crowd of people. He put me on his shoulders, and I listened to President Eisenhower, so I followed him very deeply. And he talked about the military-industrial complex. He talked about what would happen. And it's here. It's done. At the same time, this whole thing of weapons, people building these more and more complex, more destructive weapons, and the money going into that. And yet, on the other hand, we have all these children starving, dying from no water when there should never be that. This is what really, we've got to look at this so deeply at our souls, of what's really going on here, and find that compassion for one another, that love. We are one human family. We're all Indigenous people of this Mother Earth, our sacred Mother Earth, sacred to each and every one of us, our children. We love our children as much as anybody else in this Mother Earth, unless they've been so hurt that they don't have lost that capacity. But most human beings love their children. They'll fight for their children if they think they're threatened. And then we have to look at the propaganda. It's propaganda war. All this mistruth that's being told us about so many things. In fact, people don't even know what the truth is anymore.
Yep. So I'm inviting everybody. Let's be a part of this tale of synergy that brings this global peace formula summit into form. That's what Zelensky's calling for. And we've got so many powerful, wise people, like Jonathan Granoff is going to share on Monday his views on human security and why that's a pathway to peace. And Dot Maver, who's here, and the Seven Sisters.
If you're going to do the teleminute,
And of course, Avon Madison. I mean, there's so many of us have dedicated our lives to peace. LauraSa, I mean, the list goes on.
Yes.
If there ever was a time for us to get creative, to figure out how do we weave what we have, how do we turn what we have into what we need to make this global peace formula summit. Now, we're going to support Jim with his. It's one step in that direction, but there needs to be our voices heard at this time.
And I want to say too that we're all learning. I remember as growing up, even though a lot of people didn't even know that I was my whole world was an indigenous world when I grew up, even though I have some French, English, and Irish background. How they got together, I'm not sure, the French and Irish and English. But the thing is, I've learned is I've listened to my Irish relatives and my Scottish relatives. They went through the same genocide we went through. And then you go and look and see what the Roman legions did to our relatives in England and all the battling and fighting and so forth and so on. I mean, only hurt people hurt people. Only colonized people colonize people. Only abused people abuse people.
Yep.
Well, we have to look at all sides. That's what I found when I went to Europe and saw what happened there. And I understood more deeply how things happened here. But that's the kind of compassion.
Yeah. No, Dot just texted me to say, hey, the time is right. And you're right. We need to look at from all sides. Silence is action as well. So Dot, come share with us a global silent minute.
And Dot, you're here right at the time because I figured an hour would be about as much as we could go, and we're hitting right exactly at an hour. And so I would just ask that I love it when you do this, that we can just really go inside and through this silent minute, come out with a whole new understanding and vision. I hope that I can understand more deeply this issue in the next weeks, so I can better understand it, explain it, and be as just as possible as for everybody, for our human family. So thank you so much, my beloved sister.
Bless you, Brother Phil, and thank you for this invitation. As we do approach the top of the hour, we will join millions around the world in both sides of the veil. And yes, to deepening our understanding of what it is that's actually emergent on the planet at this time. The Global Silent Minute was inspired by the Big Ben Silent Minute, which was introduced in the Second World War by Wellesley Tudor Pole as a spiritual weapon to harness the power of silence in selfless service to be used for the benefit of all, to bring an end to the World War and ultimately to all warring, to bring peace to humankind and all life. And in 2023, as you know, Brother Phil and John, our theme is reorient to truth through silence. Power of silence is greater than we know. So in fact, after the World War ended, a high-ranking German officer said, "We couldn't find a way to counter your secret weapon. It was preceded by ringing of bells, and I believe you called it the Silent Minute." Well, this original Big Ben Silent Minute helped to end World War II. The Global Silent Minute, daily at 9 p.m. GMT, is helping to end all war and to bring peace to humankind. Your call, Brother Phil, for peace by 2030. So today, this Global Silent Minute supports a call for the end of war, no nuclear weapons, and the realization of peace by 2030. And as we prepare to enter our silent minute, let us be mindful of this great shift we are living through. It's the frequency of peace, of right relations with self, with others, and all of life that is our guide. So thank you, Brother Phil, for bringing us together today and for sharing this history and calling for unprecedented unified action. We'll enter 1 minute of silence as action in sacred unity, holding the intention for global cooperation, peace, and freedom, as we call for a ceasefire, a world free of nuclear weapons, a world living in peace. So let's prepare to enter the silence together. We take a deep breath as we imagine healing and peace activated within our own fiery hearts. And we link our hearts across distance. And now we take another moment and we invite our ancestors and all those on the other side of the veil to assist with our sacred intention. May peace prevail on earth.
Peace prevail on earth. And I'd like to close in our traditional way. Shunkmano he meado, Shinupasapa he meado, halami chante washte. My names are Shunkmano, a leader of warriors who takes the enemy's best horses. My name is Shinupasapa, a sacred black pipe, born of thunder, lightning, and rain, and I stand fully responsible before the Creator for all my words and my actions. Halami chante washte.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you, dear brother. All right, everybody. So game on between now and the Ukraine Peace Summit that Humanity Rising has scheduled for February 27th to March 3rd. Let's lean in. Let's take on the challenge to be creative, to bring everything we have to bear at this moment.
Aho.
More urgent. Thanks, everyone.
Aho.
Oh.
After strategic planning meetings in Poland to build out, help build out a city of hope, and expand the House of Hope and the bakery complex there with One Humanity Institute. And so to go from touring the two largest extermination camps from the Holocaust, where 1.1 million souls were tortured and killed, then to go into Ukraine, my intention was for 2 weeks and then go on to Egypt for COP27. I ended up staying 2 months because it was so intense. In this, the capital city of Kyiv, where the missiles were being launched from Belarus, they were targeting the electrical power stations and the waterworks because they really truly wanted to freeze everyone during this winter and encourage them to get out, move away, be displaced from their homes. And 12 million refugees from this war. I got to visit many of the neighboring countries that took in the majority of those refugees, but the majority of them were the elders and mostly women and children. And within Ukraine, the number of displaced people, especially from the eastern side over to the central and western side, is just mind-boggling. To go into areas like Kharkiv that were just targeted at 5 a.m. with missiles into family communities, these large apartment buildings, surrounding a playground, completely devastated. And I got to stay with my host family of millennial youth, and going into their patio area, you could see the bombings, just from their patio and on their own building. And while I was there, it's like, I heard the sirens and I heard the, bombs going off, and they knocked on my wall and said, "Mama LauraSa, are you okay?" I'm like, "Yes, shouldn't we be going into some bomb shelters?" There's really nowhere to go. Just come into the hallway, close your door to get away from the shattering of the windows. And if it's our time to go, then so be it. I think that was the saddest part for me, was to see that they have integrated this into their normal lives. It's become the norm now. They said that in the beginning, the first couple of months, everyone would panic and scramble, but now it's like, this is part of their daily routine. We'd be out having dinner out in a courtyard at a restaurant, and people just don't even flinch anymore. Children playing in a park, they don't even blink an eye when the warning sirens come on. This has become the norm. This is unacceptable. It's unacceptable. And I traveled from place to place, even with a team that went in with ambulances to villages that were recently liberated, that had been occupied for 6 to 7 months by the Russians. And to see the devastation, they took out all the electrical, power lines, the water lines. People were like meant to starve and killed by, starvation and neglect. In one area that I was getting ready to go into was they were unearthing over 400 bodies that were buried in shallow graves. Some of them were Ukrainian military that were hands tied behind their backs, gagged, and thrown into a grave along with children and women and elders. It's like, where is our humanity? Where is the love and compassion and our spirit connected to source? And I couldn't go in. It was like supposed to be on a Tuesday, but that Monday, missiles were bombed. Places were just, it was crazy. And I went from there to Lviv. Right now, we just, with One Humanity Institute, sent 800 teddy bears, 30 orphanages. So many of these babies, these children, are the product of this senseless war. As a mother, my heart has been broken into a million pieces, and I just want to say, enough is enough. These men need to sit down and be silent. The women, the mothers, the nurturers of life need to have their voices and their hearts heard. It's gone on for far too long. These war games, the sacrificial pawns of these war games that are not only in Russia, Ukraine, Syria, Yemen, but even across my Pacific Islands. These have gone on for generations. And what is it going to take to shift the tide of all this madness? It will never end unless we do something different, like John and everyone has said. Going into Odessa, which is another area that is highly targeted by Russia because they want to control everything that leads to the port areas. And so Odessa, you couldn't even go on the beach because landmines were planted everywhere. And the destruction of the human lives, but also the destruction of Mother Earth, this impacts all of us. I love the thought, the idea, the vision of going in as Indigenous peoples, not just from America, from across the Pacific and all around the world. The wisdom of the Indigenous people, they carry this ancestral knowledge of caring for the earth as stewards, not as land grabbers and controlling the resources and capitalism, but truly recognizing our oneness with Mother Earth and all creation, including the human relations, which is the most destructive relation of all. It's time that we come into harmony and back into sacred balance. So what is it that's going to take to have that happen? I feel what, Chief Brother Uncle Phil has said, that there needs to be a democratic vote within these 4 regions that are now completely taken over by Russia, and also of Crimea. There needs to be a transparent, accountable, democratic voting process. And then the other sad reality is that in these areas, so many have been killed, and now people from Russia have been moving in there. So the demographic of those that are living there has already been, controlled. Take, for example, Mariupol, a thriving, beautiful city of Mariupol. 95% was destroyed. About almost 500,000 residents within that beautiful city. It went down to less than 100,000 in a matter of weeks. Over 22,000 Ukrainian soldiers sacrificed their life trying to safeguard that city. Over 17,000 soldiers were taken as prisoners of war. People were marched out of Mariupol, never to be seen again. Nobody knows if they've been put into mass grave or what. But this is the reality that's not making the news. I learned about it while I was there. I wanted to go there from Odessa, from Kyiv, but there was no entry, not from the Ukrainian side and certainly not from the Russian side. But my hope, my prayer, and I've set the intention in motion, is to go back and to go first to Belarus and then from there into Moscow. And my hope is to go down to Mariupol through the Russian side, because that's the only way that entry can be gained. And I don't know, my hope, my dream is to have a Peace Sunday, next major concert like we had in 1982, 40 years ago. And that was to help put in a nuclear freeze as America and Russia were mounting up on nuclear weaponry to go into the Cold War. And, you know, it was successful. All these people coming together. The power of oneness is impactful. That's what happened. The war was, you know, stopped. There was a nuclear freeze in place. But I don't think the war between Russia and America has ever truly ended. Someone has already said that here. It will never end until we do something different. And I would love to see more mothers and more women bring forth their voices and come together, and let's all sing and do the sacred song and dance together with the men as the two equally balanced and harmonized wings of the eagle, as Chief Phil Lane has shared. It's time that we all, as rainbow warriors and a rainbow tribe, gather under the sacred tree, as Crazy Horse prophesied about. This is the time. We are the seventh generation that our ancestors prayed in. All of us, the rainbow tribe. And I know, I feel that the time is coming closer and closer for this paradigm shift to really unfold and take place and take hold, not a temporary Band-Aid fix. Those Band-Aid fixes are not working. We need to go to the root of the issues that we have been dealing with systemically now for generations. I just wanted to be silent and to be listening. And I think that we need to recognize the power of silence even more so than ever before, because no one's listening to one another. So let us go inward and listen to Spirit for guidance. That's my prayer. That's my hope. Aho.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
So you have your hand up there.
Yeah, maybe to take our sister's advice and just take a minute to breathe and breathe really deeply and find that peace and be quiet and listen for a minute. I think that was a brilliant remembrance to take a breath and to listen to the silence, and to do that on behalf of our leaders who are so terrified. I really think all this display, this silverback display of power, is coming from a fear. They're terrified of losing some value, which is actually becoming a self-fulfilling prophecy. And I'm visualizing, I've participated in some restorative practice circles where opposing sides come together, sitting in a circle, and they're facilitated to listen, to be silent, to share, and go back and forth until the two opposing sides are beginning to open up and feel each other's humanity. They're hearing the story, they're hearing, how did this feel, and what was the impact? And there was no attack on the other person. There was just simply a sharing until there became a blend. And I've literally witnessed in this process, literally all the barriers come down, all the armoring drops off, and the two opposing sides, you see their humanity emerging. And I'm not kidding, at the end, you see them embracing as one people, even having come from dangerous opposing sides. I know that this process has been done in some of the most dangerous places in the planet successfully. It just hasn't been sustained. So, but this is the way. Yeah.
Well, you know, brother, my saliva is really running down my cheeks now. I can smell that food. But I would like to leave. I'd like to leave with this song of the White Buffalo Cattleman, because she came about 950 AD, and all her teachings, the vibration of those teachings are in the songs and ceremonies. And this particular one is really this covenant I believe in. And the words say, Kola le chele chuo, says, friend, do it this way. Whatever you do in life, you do the best you can. If you get knocked down, get up. And it's kind of inferring, if you get knocked down 1,000 times, get up 1,000 times. And it says, if you do it that way, your ancestors, the creator, grandfather, grandmother, are going to see you. And here's the covenant. It says, when one sits in the sacred hoop of the people, one must be responsible. And that includes all those spiritual teachings. And then it says the promise, the covenant. If you do it that way, whatever you ask for, that's exactly the way it's going to be. We need to proceed that way. So I just like to, for my part, I could leave with that song from that beautiful sacred woman who gave these songs and have kept us going for all these many years of whatever we've been through, and taught us to be kind and loving and compassionate. Holy chili chuo, holy chili chuo, holy chili chuo, holy chili chuo. Hey, Chanuki, Takuya Chinkuye, Chekuteo. Hoto Kawashi, you are little Takeki, Petsuyo Pahyo, Hey, Chanuki. Takuya Tinkuye. I'll leave it like that. There's more verses. I'll sing them later. Thank you so much. Love you all.